You know what's funny is like I feel like I'm almost desensitized to cannibalism just because of all the movies that I've watched over the years, but it is still like because I was reading a bunch of like stuff about the
You don't just say that real quick and then keep going.
No, in movies.
Hello, welcome to Survivor's Ed, How to Not Die First in a Horror Movie. I'm Chris.
I'm Tawny.
I'm Miles.
We are two blacks and a Mexican here to explain why you need protein in your diet. This is a horror movie podcast where we talk about movies that we love. All of them scary, some of them not, but they all try to be scary. And this week we are talking about a movie that Tawny introduced us to. I did not even know this movie existed until Tawny Ochoa put it on my radar. The movie is Ravenous. It came out in 1999, directed by Antonia Bird, starring Guy Pearce and was it Jeffrey Jones? Yeah. Jeffrey Jones, of which we do not speak apparently anymore. And really great cast, Robert Carlyle. And this is a movie about, people eating people. Real slice of life kind of movie. And that's kind of the thing, right? This is our first cannibal movie. And that's the overarching horror thing of it. But it's pretty complex because there's a little bit of a mystical element of the Wendigo and what happens to you when you eat another person. And that sort of feeds the story and many of the characters, I guess.
Did you say feeds the story?
Exactly.
Oh, you're doing a lot of little one-liners.
I'm feeling punny today, y'all. I'm feeling mad punny. All right. So what's the situation in Ravenous?
The situation
tell
is...
us how you learned about it.
Yeah. It's not that interesting. I'm sorry if I built it up to be so. But one summer...
It better be real good.
I know.
Summer...
I was at home and it was on TV.
No. This is just a little slice of like 1999, right? So it must have... So, okay, 1999, that tells me that it... So there was this one summer that I worked at Blockbuster Video, right? When they still existed. And I can't remember which year it was. It might have been after my sophomore year in college or after it must have been after my sophomore year because that would have been 1999. And it was right about the time. No, that doesn't even make. Okay, so I used to rent a lot of movies. It was right about the time that like indie movies were starting to be this thing that all the cool kids did, right? Like you go to the video store and you check something out that's not some mainstream big blockbuster movie, and it was the thing. It was like that was like when I first started discovering Quentin Tarantino and like Reservoir Dogs, like around that time when I was like the high school to college. Anyway, I must have rented some. I don't remember what the heck I rented, but Ravenous was one of the trailers that was at the beginning of something that I rented, and I remember being like, and one of the things that I've read about the movie is that they just didn't do a very good job marketing it. Like the posters were stupid. Like you couldn't really tell what it was about based on what the studio was putting out. But I was like, in my little weird horror heart, I was like, I need to see that movie. And I think at the time, maybe I was like, I don't know, I'm probably like aware of Trainspotting, so I knew who Robert Carlyle was. Like Trainspotting was a big movie when I was in college. Everyone that had I had that fucking poster on my wall. Like in college, the Trainspotting poster, the lineup poster. And I don't even think I knew I must not have known who Guy Pearce was yet. Cause I don't think he was on my radar.
Yeah.
Was
I think
he?
this was early for him. I mean,
yeah,
he wasn't early, but
he wasn't truly on my radar until LA Confidential. That was when I like really noticed him. And I saw that in college, but I don't remember what year. But anyway, it was my little Blockbuster job. It was one of the trailers that I like in watching many other things, but being the times, it was really hard to find it. Like Blockbuster didn't carry it, and I can't remember how I eventually got my hands on it. It must have been like, I think I bought it. I think I just went out and like bought the DVD or ordered it because I was so like sure that I was going to like it, and it did not fail to win me over. So the situation.
Wow.
It starts and it's Mexican-American War. the 1840s, right? Late 1840s. And this was the war where, just a little historical context, where President at the time, James K. Polk, sort of wheedled the Mexican army into confrontation. There was like a dispute over the northernmost boundary of Mexico, the Nueces or the Rio Grande, and Polk kind of sent troops because he knew that if he picked a fight, he'd win it, right? And so that's the war. So we're in this situation where the United States is, westward expansion, manifest destiny, which is sort of the big sort of symbolic underpinning here. But we meet Captain Boyd, and he's sort of gets credit for being a hero, though it's an act of cowardice that results in his he accidentally he lays down and plays dead, and he ends up accidentally ingesting some blood and stuff, and then it gives him like super strength, and he's able to take out this whole fort or whatever single-handedly. And his superiors know that he was a coward, and so they send him to this like fort. Why am I blanking out on the name right now? But this fort in like the mountains in California, like the cold ass snow mountains. Fort Spencer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's like this little ragtag crew of like misfits and weirdos. And then one night, this mysterious stranger shows up needing their help. So that's sort of the setup. Anybody want to take it from there?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'll say, like, I have a very long history with this movie that dates back to yesterday. I just saw this.
I thought you were about to reveal something. Like,
I never heard of this movie, like at all. I've never seen it marketed or anything. So, yeah, this one was brand new for me, and it was super dope. Like, I was like, I don't know why I've never seen this before. This is like right up my alley, like something I would have watched. But yeah, great cast. Like, again, this is I don't think I would have. Guy Pearce was not on my radar at all in 1999. So it's kind of maybe that's why the cast is a little low key. Like, it's not they don't have the biggest stars in there. Robert Carlyle is creepy as hell in here. Like,
yeah.
like super
he's
creepy.
Like impish, like he's like a little devil.
Yeah.
He's chewing the scenery. Yeah.
And that's like that's the thing that's like I think that makes him a great villain is he's not very like physically imposing or anything.
Right.
He looks like not really, and that's maybe what makes them all let their guard down anyway is the fact that he doesn't really. I think there's like a reference to him being, so thin even when he shows up at the camp, and it's like, yeah, this guy's not gonna, not gonna do anything. And then he's like super fire with like every weapon ever created.
Right.
He's like, what? Like, why is this dude so good with like every weapon? But yeah, it's a dope movie, man. Super creepy. Like, I was, watching it and, letting it build up, and they're, and then when things start to reveal, like once they go back to the cave and the intensity starts to, I'm like, whoa, what's happening right now, man? That's
That sound that. Have you ever heard a creepier? I remember the first time I saw that, I was like, are you fucking kidding me right now? Like, what is that sound? It's the most like, like something disgusting is about to happen. Creepy. And he's matching that. Like he's like, like he's spazzing out, and then he starts digging like an animal. Oh, it's just such a creepazoid, and inspired
you don't know what to make of it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's good. Yeah, he is the reason the movie really works so well, I think, Robert Carlyle, because Ives is such a like he pulls off the sort of traumatized, disheveled, when he first arrives and he's all like telling this story, and he sells the story so well, and then when the turn happens, it's so funny to like it's weird because it's like this weird little like. Tonally, it's kind of weird. It's like horror comedy, and like, so when the turn actually happens, I was saying this in the text exchange that how like the score is so funny because
The
when
score
the
is
turn happens,
ridiculous.
it just pops in with this really like over the top music, and you're just like,
Well,
and I
that
don't know why it
cave-
reminded me of like, yeah,
The cave music was like dum 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 dum.
Yeah.
dum, dum, dum.
yeah,
And then he started, and you're like, oh my god, yeah. It's just
Right.
there's so many things going on. Yeah, like what's happening?
yeah.
Even like the main score that's like kind of reoccurring is like, what is happening? Like, I don't understand it. Like, it's so
Yeah.
random. Like, it's just not a traditional score at all. Like that you would think a movie like this, because really like nothing they do to me really plays for comedy, except for stuff that you see David Arquette doing, which is, I mean, why you cast David Arquette,
Right. Yeah. He's just.
But nothing that anyone else is doing really plays for comedy to me. It's the score
It's
that
the
makes
score.
it.
Yeah.
Well, I think Toffler's a pretty ridiculous character, right? Like they're all
Yeah,
ridiculous.
yeah.
Like they all have these things about themselves that are like each character has some like exaggeration, like some grotesque like thing about them that has set in and probably just like ballooned out because of the isolation and the boredom, right? Like this crazy soldier who's like standing in the water, and then the drunk who's just drunk. The whole movie.
I laughed so hard at
Drunk.
that scene when they
When he
cut
wakes
to
him
the
up,
soldier
and he's
though,
like,
and he's just
yeah.
screaming.
Screaming in the water, yeah. Right?
Just it was such a like surface level like depiction of a soldier. Like,
But you don't
he's just
necessarily
screaming.
know that it's all gonna get so funny until that music, that like upbeat fiddle,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that like weird like yodeling sound. Like what's going on?
Yeah.
That's when it's weird because it's like it's just the exact. I think what Miles was saying and what you're both saying is like accurate. Like it's definitely, it guides the way you see the scene. We're gonna well, I won't get into that. I was gonna start talking about Justice League, but score basically impacts the way you view a scene. You could hear two different scores on the same scene and feel something different. But yeah, so this character Ives makes this sort of villainous turn early in the movie, and he's in pursuit of Boyd, and then Boyd finds himself trapped in a hole with our is that Toffler? No, that's not Toffler. That's
Toffler's the religious.
Right.
That was Neil McDonough's character.
Neil
yeah,
McDonough.
Toffler's
Yeah.
the mumbly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lost. Every time I
Yeah.
saw him, I
Yes.
just
Daniel
thought
Faraday.
Lost.
Yeah.
Also,
Daniel Faraday.
he's been in a ton of stuff. But yeah, so he's trapped down there with Reich. Reich dies, and he eats parts of Reich to stay alive, and is sort of through his previous experience and through this kind of loosely indoctrinated into this sort of cannibalistic thing that he's fighting to resist throughout the rest of the movie. And it becomes this kind of interplay between him and Ives, and Ives kind of constantly playing this chess game. And what I think is so great about the portrayal of Ives is that he you're right, like he's not physically imposing, but he's intimidating all of a sudden. And the switch is so like smooth. Like he goes from this kind of sort of, disheveled like guy and into being like kind of comically over the top crazy. And then when they get back to the camp, he becomes this chess player.
Yeah.
And like
this
there's
like
this whole
urbane
thing
gentleman.
happening. Yeah, and everybody believes him, and you get frustrated because you're like, come on, like it's one of those movies where you're like, no one will believe Boyd, and those movies always drive me crazy when you have your main character and no one is listening to them. But it's so good the way they go back and forth throughout the movie, and Boyd is constantly trying to get the upper hand on Ives and keeps getting undercut by other people who believe Ives. Yeah.
The thing that's interesting is that Boyd is like, ostensibly our protagonist, our hero, and he's so ineffectual. Like the way he ends up there in the first place is that he lays down in battle and pretends he's dead, right? And then like I read somewhere like he doesn't have any he doesn't even speak for like 20 minutes or something like that into the movie. Like he's just standing there. Like he maybe like they play some voiceover of him answering questions in some kind of tribunal. Like They're like, how did you, and you can hear his voice, but you can't, like, he doesn't say anything on screen for the longest ass time.
Wow.
Yeah, like, and he's just like, he has this like sad, like kind of, and then he asks him like, what's
Guy
your
Pearce
freaking
is so good at that.
Yeah, he's so good.
Gotta talk about that the epic, like, extra long director's cut ass fall down the hill though. That I was like, damn, this shit is going on long as hell. I was like, damn. I mean, I don't know if I've ever fallen down a hill like that before, but I was like, shit, man.
That's
like
a Chris Farley level falling.
Yeah.
Man.
Endless falling.
No, and it's like,
I
it's
love
not
that.
just rolling down the hill. It's like when he's hitting branches and his fucking body's flipping all over the place, and he's just like, and you can kind of hear him. But no, but like he lays there. He doesn't want to eat Reich. He's like having this conversation with people that aren't there. Like I read somewhere that she was trying to evoke something of Dracula with the howling of the wolves and the moon. I can't remember exactly what it was. But he knows that if he eats Reich, that, you know, like that he'll be able to get out of the pit and make it back and stuff. And it's just like this thing where, like, you know, Colquhoun / Ives. Colquhoun is the name he gives him when he first gets there, and he's pretending still. And he tells him his sad story, his Donner Party story. But he's like, I've realized that, like, I need to just be evil. Not be evil, but, like, I'm just going to consume what I need to do, so that I can go on. And, like, Boyd knows that is the way to survive. But he like, I read somewhere, like, he hasn't had the courage. He doesn't get the courage to actually die himself, you know, because that would take courage. It would take courage to actually lay down and die if you felt that that's what you should do. And he's not able to do that, and he finally is at the end, and they die embracing, right? Like, they die in this weird, you know, embrace. It's
weirdly intimate, yeah.
Weirdly intimate, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And no.
I was gonna say, like, that. I mean, like, I didn't even, like, think about it, like, in that way either, like, because at the beginning, I mean, they start with that. I love that scene too at the beginning where he's, like, just piled underneath he's underneath all this just ridiculous pile of just corpses. I mean, it just looks like painful as hell. Like, I would panic. I would go crazy just because it doesn't even look like you can move at all, and getting out of it is like, dude. And there's blood literally just spilling all. The blood in this movie is terrible, by the way.
Yeah,
I forgot about that.
It looks sweet almost.
That's why he want to eat. That's why he wants it. Yeah,
it's like
It still
strawberry
grossed
jelly.
me
blood
out.
look good. Yeah.
You know what the grossest thing? The grossest thing is that steak.
Oh yeah,
nasty steak.
that was like one of the nastiest parts to me is the opening scene where they're like cutting up all that steak. I was like, ugh, man, put that shit back on the grill, man.
Yeah,
The
for a
fuck?
few
Like,
more
that ain't
minutes.
done. Like,
It's like sitting
that
in
shit
a
ain't
pool
done,
of blood.
bro.
Gross.
Yeah. No, the scene, the stew scene too is where
yeah,
he's bleeding,
yeah.
coughing up blood, and they're just eating stew, and like, you know what I was laughing at is just like, it would look like a really good hearty stew.
Yeah, it did.
I was like, this stew
It
looked
looked like
fire.
a curry and shit.
Potatoes in there.
The big old
Right,
potatoes.
I
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
like, damn, that stew look. I might have got a bowl of that stew though. Like,
The boy at the end, like,
Yeah.
he sells it when he's like the general when they get there, and
oh yeah,
he's just taking his sip. And he's like, he's just like, yeah.
Yeah.
He's like, bet. It's like, you're about to be a cannibal, sir. How does that work? I'm interested. You know, it's interesting. It's like, but the movie at first made me think, until we actually see him heal and everything, I was like thinking it was a psychological thing, like where, you know, you mentally just think that's the case and therefore it is. And until he actually heals faster from the wound. Because at the end, I'm just like, if that hadn't been there at the end, I would have questioned, like, well, if you don't know you're eating person, do you still get that high/addiction to
Interesting.
it?
I was thinking
You know-
that too, like sort of a split type of thing where there was that sort of thought process of, is he just actually able to do these things, or is it in his mind, you know, and he believes it so much that he's doing these things. Like,
And
I
that
couldn't
he's
tell.
like convincing, because almost like there's an interesting idea that, yeah, like that justifies you doing it, you know, is if you tell yourself that. But it seems like the movie is telling us that it actually is what happened.
Yeah, he definitely has some powers. Like, he definitely has
shot,
power.
for example. He gets shot. He shoots
Right.
it.
Yeah.
When that music's playing, and he just sits up like a fucking like a puppet or something. You know what's one of the things that I think is interesting is that when he shows up and he's all messed up and they think he's dying, and he's describing what happened and like, you know, there's such a like that. There's that taboo. You know what's funny is like I feel like I'm almost desensitized to cannibalism just because of all the movies that I've watched over the years, but it is still like. Because I was reading a bunch of like stuff about the. I know.
Don't just say that real quick and then keep going.
No, in movies. But like, I'm like, it didn't even occur to me that like this is about cannibalism and that's this awful subject. But he's telling them what happened and he's describing how they ate the oxen and they ate the horses and then they ate their belts and then they tried to dig up roots. And then finally one day, like somebody died of starvation and he goes, well, when I returned, they were cooking his legs. And everyone's like, oh, like you could see everybody just be physically repulsed. And then so he tells that story of like when they ate him and they're like, okay. But then he says, like one of the things he says and like the hunger was different. It was like, I think he says the word wanton or craven. And I think that's such an interesting thing that he's the villain. Like he's the guy who's doing this and he's able to identify and be like, this is a wanton and craven thing that I am doing. Nevertheless, like I am still doing it.
I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And enjoying it.
Because he had tuberculosis. Remember?
Yeah, he did say that. And that should be a red flag for them, like that point. Because like if that does happen where somebody says, you know, this is what we had to do to survive, I don't think I'm judging you based off of, you know, you needing to survive.
Yeah.
People do crazy things, you know, to survive. But the fact that he made that statement of it being like a wanting, like it was a different feeling. I've been like, wait, what? Yeah, I've been like,
and then
put this dude back outside.
He was licking me.
Yeah,
right.
Like your boy comes over and just starts talking to you about this story, and he's just like, yeah, and then it's this dark moment, like, and then we had to eat each other, and then like a second later, he's just like, and it was fire too, and it was good. Like it's like, wait, hold up,
I kind of want to do it again,
stop.
even.
Yeah, like
doesn't he say virile? He uses the word virile to describe like
he uses the word virile. Because
he's like, ooh.
Yeah, there's definitely a sexual connotation to it in the way he says it. And then and then he references the woman, and it's crazy. One thing I'll bring up before we, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just gonna say that scene with Toffler. Like I remember again the first time I watched this movie, which I've watched this movie like a gazillion times, and I remember that scene when Toffler wakes up and everybody's like all confused, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, he was licking me. Like he can barely talk. And then he's like, he was licking me. And it's so disturbing because he's so disturbed by it. Like he's so like, what a fucking nightmare, get that guy out.
And it's the first time we've heard him that loud, right? Because he was like mumbly up until then.
Super mumbly. He doesn't even talk. Remember when he tries to wake up Knox? And he's like,
and everyone talks over his prayer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
I forgot about that.
But
Jeffrey Jones
and then
is really good in this too, for the record.
He is.
Unfortunately,
I'm just saying.
But, Oh, you know what? I did have a question though. Like that. So that scene where he like falls after the fall, and he's sort of in that pit with Reich. What's his name? Reich.
Reich. Mm-hmm.
And he like, is this in his mind where he like wakes up and like goes after him, like he's dead, but he like wakes up and like starts choking him or something like that? Like,
I think he's still. It's like a last burst of life.
Was that his last?
Yeah.
Okay. I was like, why is he a monster? I was so confused. Like, wait,
Well,
why is he doing that right now?
So what's interesting, I'm glad you mentioned the monster thing, because for the second time in this podcast, I'm going to bring up a video game called Until Dawn. Because what's weird is I played this game. This is the same game I mentioned in, I can't remember what episode. I think it was the Purge episode, maybe. But we talked about a part in the game where you have to decide whether to kill someone and all that stuff. Well, this game, so this game actually, like, the main villain or creatures in this game are called Wendigo. And the whole backstory behind them is that they are people who, because of cannibalism, because they ate other people, when they had the taste of human flesh, they sort of slowly turned into these monsters. And I didn't know that this was a thing, like an actual, like, thing that was drawn from, like, folklore or legend.
Did you ever read?
I just was like, oh, that's a cool thing they made up for this video game. And then, like, I saw it in this movie. I'm like, whoa, okay.
Did you read Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark? Did you ever read any of those books? Those
when I was younger, but I didn't. Yeah, no, I didn't like.
So there's a Wendigo story in one of those. I think it's in the first one of the Wendigo. There's actually, and then those books are super cool because in the back there's such a great index of, like, the source material for all the different folkloric sources, because all those stories are sourced from, like, American folklore and stuff. But yeah, it's like an actual myth. And I was just I forgot to say earlier, like, when they're about to go out to they're forming the party to go out to the cave or whatever, and George, and I think it's so funny that they're named George. Okay, George and Martha are clearly not their names. Who named these? George Washington and Martha Washington, right? That's the first thing that comes to mind.
Right.
And like, what fucking obnoxious white man named them George and Martha? Number one. And then
right.
George takes what's his name? Why can't I always forget Jeffrey Jones's name in the movie? Hart. I think is it Hart?
Hart.
Yeah.
Colonel
Yeah.
Hart. Yeah.
He takes Hart, and I think Boyd's with him, and he shows them, like, the scroll or the whatever the piece of cloth or leather it is that has the drawing of the Wendigo on it, and he, like, the little line about every Sunday, like, white man eats the flesh of Jesus Christ in church, like, to supposedly sort of attain spiritual longevity, right?
Right. Yeah. No, that was a funny.
That
little,
is,
yeah. Well, speaking of George and Martha, why don't we pivot to our second segment of the show called "You Good, Homie?" And this is where we check in on our people of color in the movie. This time it's a couple of indigenous folks, George and Martha, who have very different fates. This movie, markedly different. So what happened? Why don't we start with George? We'll get through George relatively quickly, I suppose.
Yeah, I felt bad for him because I was like, he was literally, like, giving them the heads up, like, of everything. Like, he was warning them, like, hey, this is what this is. He's telling us the plot, like, hey, this is what's going on. And they're like, sit down, watch out, like, sit down, like, yeah, like, and then he dies, like, instantly, like, oh.
Well, he dies. He's trying to. He throws the axe, right? Isn't that when he, Robert Carlyle lifts up, and it hits him in the back? And then, what does he shoot him? I can't remember how does he shoot him? And he falls. It's very theatrical.
I think he shoots
it's very
him,
like it's very like it reminds me of, like, the stunt shows at Knott's Berry Farm where the guy just goes shoo, like just falls over, like, almost, like, completely straight. But yeah, George dies. He dies, and I feel bad because it's like what did he need to be there for? He's not in the freaking army. Like, he's just some dude that, like, lives in the area.
Well, he kind of had a Halloran type role if you really, like, look at what his purpose in the story was just to tell you about this magical stuff and then die.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's like Halloran light because he didn't even get to do he didn't get to run the distance like Halloran did.
Yeah. I didn't even think about that literally, though. Like, that's what his purpose is, to explain to them, like, what is in us, what's happening, and then die. Very unceremoniously.
Yeah, similar.
Like,
yeah. It's sort of semi-involved in axe too.
I know. Yeah. Well, he threw a hatchet, which
axe.
is pretty much an axe.
Yeah,
like,
little axe,
a baby axe.
It's well aimed. But it does not go well for him. Yeah, it does not go well for him at all.
So let's pour one out for George and move on to Martha. Sorry,
Martha
George.
got out of there. Martha was not playing. She was
Martha
not with it at all.
Skipped town as soon as she could. Really, no. Actually, I really wish they would have just left as soon as that guy showed up. Just bye, guys, and then everyone would have been like, "Why'd they leave?" You know, like just been left on their own to figure out why.
Yeah, because they were suspicious of him anyway. Like you know.
Yeah,
they kind of had it figured out from the jump.
Martha, and one of the things I had, you know, we in talking about this, like, you know, one of the things that's interesting about George and Martha is one commonality they have, obviously, is they're both Indigenous, played by Indigenous actors. But they both seem to have, like, this weird kind of little friendship with Cleves, the David Arquette character, who is, for all intents and purposes, just a sort of fucked up stoner. Right, like I think Hart calls him like the over-medicated Mr. Cleves, like refers to him, and then they show there's a little scene where they show Cleves and George just laughing their asses off and smoking, like I guess weed. I don't like it might be something else because peyote's also mentioned in stuff not to buy when you go into town. He's like no loco weed, no peyote. But so they're like super high and they're giggling and they're laughing, and at the dinner they're also like the giggling and laughing continue. So and then Cleves and Martha are the ones who head out to town together, and you kind of get the sense that Martha's used to keeping Cleves in line. Like they have kind of a little bond. And then one of the like very, very few, if any, I can't even think of any others that I just noticed upon rewatch was that, so like, you know, I can't remember exactly what point it is after the search party and everybody dies but there's a scene where like Cleves and Martha are standing next to each other, and Cleves puts his like he like looks at her and he puts his arm around her and they like hug because they're sad because George is gone, and like he's the only one who acknowledges like your brother got killed. And, you know, that was his friend that he hung out with. So, but Martha's very different than George. She's completely stoic. Like, one of the things Hart says about her is, like, I bet she didn't get a word out of her. You know, like, she doesn't talk. Yeah. She does talk when she snaps, like, Boyd comes to her to try to be like, it's not me, I didn't do it. And she's like, get out of here. Like, you're all guilty. Like, I'm not interested in your it's not me story because I know that what you are too. Like, that's basically what she kind of says to him. Awesome. Like, I know... Yeah. I know what you are. But yeah, so what's our rule then? No. Yeah. So Martha does okay. Martha does okay.
What I love about she's so tough, and like I was a little upset that obviously that she got in the way of Boyd taking out Ives at that point in the movie, but it was also such a cool scene when like she puts the knife to Ives' throat and then the knife just shows up at Boyd's throat and she's like, you kill him, I kill you. And it was just like this, I don't know, it's just like, man, Martha needs a movie. Let me get that Martha action movie. Epic. I love that.
Or the scene where like cool Knox is, somebody's like, we need somebody to go into town and get this, and then she's just sitting there in her like her tent, like, oh God, I'm gonna, and he's like, any volunteers? And she's like, of course it's me, you know, like. Like, do you remember that scene? Like, she's like, I don't even know why we're even pretending like you're going to ask anybody else. I'm the only competent person here.
She's like, you only poked your head in here because you knew. Exactly. And like, didn't he said any volunteers, and she was like the only one in there, right? She's all
right. She's like, anybody in here? Anybody? Yeah. like nobody in here. Yeah. Like, fam, it's one person in here.
Like, we know what you're doing.
So you're just not going to dress me then, right?
No, and I love that the movie ends like with her walking away from it. Like you said, what did you say? You said something funny in the text about what she
just
did.
Boned out.
She just boned out, because it's so factual. Like she just looked at what was happening, and it's just it's funny because she kind of undercuts the moment. Like it's this big, powerful moment, death scene between these two characters, and then you see Martha go in, and she's like, all right.
And she closed this door.
Right.
Yeah. She closes the door.
Like, she's like, it's like the movie ends because, you know, Martha's gone. So what else is there left to say?
And she leaves before any of the rest of the people who are gonna come and fuck everything up again, show up.
Oh
So I
yeah,
think
because there was
she's
more
just-
people headed there, and the one dude is eating the soup, so
That's who they were gonna try to recruit, like the Slauson,
Yeah,
right? I
the
think his name
general,
is.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That
was
would have
good
worked
stuff.
too. I could have seen him going for it, for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I definitely when Hart shows back up, I did not see that coming at all.
Me
I was
neither.
like,
Yeah.
whoa, what? Yeah, that threw me completely off. I mean, I knew when I knew Robert Carlyle, like his character, I knew Ives was coming back. Like when they were like bringing the guy in, I was like, oh, this better not be his ass walking in. Oh man.
yeah, and it was well played because I didn't even notice. I didn't even think about the idea that it wasn't Ives who killed the horses until Boyd said, like, "Hey, I watched you the whole time. Who was it?" And I was like, "Oh shoot, yeah." And then you see that figure come in and all that stuff, and I'm like, "Wait, what? Who's this?"
Yeah, and
it was-
Nox's sword is missing. Remember, he's like, my
Yeah,
sword is missing.
yeah.
Yeah.
sword.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, yeah, that was good stuff. So, what's our rule for this episode?
Never, under any circumstances, get high with David Arquette.
Now, this may sound similar to our rule for our Behind the Mask episode, in which we said don't do drugs. But there is a notable difference in this rule. It is not to just not do drugs. You can do all the drugs you want in this
You can do
universe.
drugs, yeah.
Just don't do them with David Arquette.
If you start doing drugs and you see David Arquette walking up, get the fuck out, get out of there.
Either
Get
drop
out
the
of there.
drugs or drop the
Drop
David Arquette.
Exactly. One can't have both.
So let's break it down. Why is that our rule? That's a notable difference, right, between our two people of color.
Or two people of color. One of them gets high with him, acts like an ass, and the other one's just serious and like keeps him in line. So maybe disciplining David Arquette is the flip side of our rule.
Yeah.
Don't get
Keep
high
David
with his
Arquette in
ass.
line.
And then
Right.
if he does happen to show up, you better check his ass once he gets there. Like
David Arquette, are you okay?
check
Are you...
him, yeah.
It's like David Arquette. It's like David Arquette has entered the chat.
He's the
Like,
the
whoa,
X
whoa,
factor.
now, David. I love it. I think, and what's funny is like, he's such a weird. He's the one character. David Arquette is the one character that consistently every time he showed up on screen just took me out of the movie. And I think it's because like it's a Western and like everybody else is just fits in, and it's just David Arquette being David Arquette.
Being David Arquette,
Like
right.
there's that part when he's out there chopping the wood and I think I forget what he's doing, but Boyd is watching him and imagines killing and eating him, and then they cut to the real him, and he just yells for no reason. It's just like that was not in the script,
Right, at all. It's just him being
just like,
himself in 1999. Like,
right? This is the guy from Ready to
Peak
Rumble.
David Arquette. Just peak David Arquette.
Yeah, at peak Arquette.
yeah.
Pre Courtney Cox, I think maybe. But definitely.
Yeah, 1999. Yeah, I think so.
Might be
or
pre-
maybe right. I don't know.
Right in the sweet
Right at
spot.
the beginning. Yeah, I don't know.
This is good. Well, this is. I really enjoyed this movie, Tawny. Like,
Yeah, it's dope. Super
I
dope,
love
yeah.
the like anything that
just,
can
like-
make me both. Yeah.
No, I wanted to ask you, like, aside from our analysis or whatever, like, what did you think? Did you have fun watching it? Were you like tripping out the same way I was when I first saw it?
I'll be honest. I was like, it was a similar thing to like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, where like when it first started, and you're right, the marketing is bad because like when I went to Amazon and like saw the like picture, I was like, all right, because it's just like frontier men looking like. Like, what is this?
Apparently, I have a thing
movie.
about that.
I
I
know,
like
yeah, Tawny and her
dusty
westerns,
ass-
and like,
yeah,
so-
I don't know.
yeah, like old dirty western. And so then when it starts and it's that, and I'm just like, all right, okay, all right. And honestly, the score, I guess we should talk about the score more like Yeah, so the music was Damon Albarn, right?
Damon
Who
Albarn
did
and another guy. Sorry, I have this
oh
pulled up. Michael Nyman.
Michael
And he
Nyman,
did
yeah.
like a serious, like not that Damon Albarn's not a serious, but like this guy does movies, right? Like he did the piano, right?
Yeah. And Damon Albarn's from the Gorillas, right?
Gorillas.
Is he the guy from the
Blur.
Gorillas? Yeah, yeah.
He Blur, and then he's
Blur,
the founder,
right.
and he's the founder, yeah, like the founding force behind Gorillas, which is like, I'm like, when you think about that, and you think about those weird like.
Towards the end, there was a beat in there where
Yep.
I was like, "This kind of sounds like Clint Eastwood." Yeah,
it does.
A little bit. Like it looked like the tone of it, that doom 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 doom. Like I could hear it, and I was like, "Oh, okay."
But it's just so interesting. And then there's also, like the like it, and I kept reading the term the troubled history of the movie. Like it went through. Antonia Bird was the third director. The original director was it's like some name that I can't really, I'm not sure how to pronounce, but it was like it was some guy who was like a really serious director. And then he had differences with the studio because they were like trying to control what he was doing, and they got rid of him. The studio got rid of him and brought in some sort of like mainstream popcorn movie-ish type director. I think went on to direct Never Been Kissed or something was his next movie. And what happened with him was that the cast kicked him out. The cast was like, no. They like refused to work with that director. And then Robert Carlyle.
So embarrassing.
Yeah, no, they were like, no. And because I guess they were excited about it.
Showed up and
I know. Nobody wanted to work. The screenplay.
Like, can you even do that? Like the studio hires this guy and they fire.
But the cast wouldn't work with him. And so Robert Carlyle at the time, like he had collaborated on a number of things with this British director who worked on like a show called EastEnders, like some British shows, and she had collaborated with him a bunch, and he insisted on her. He insisted that it had to be her. And then the screenplay is by Ted Griffin, who wrote Ocean's 11. So we have some interesting stuff going on here. Like we have some talented, original filmmaking.
See,
right? Like
that kind of makes sense. Like, because one thing I noticed was that I really liked about the movie was that the characters were so distinct. Like usually, especially like I said, I'm gonna show my card here with the westerns and stuff where like everything's all old and dirty. Like characters, if they're not really distinct, I'm just gonna forget people's names and I'm just gonna be like, oh, the other white guy with the beard, okay. Like that's my mentality. But this movie was really distinct in that each character had some quirk or something about them that made them easy for me to remember. Even if I remember their name, I'm like, oh, that's the drunk dude. Oh, that's like, and that's kind of similar to Ocean's 11, where you have these characters who have quirks, and it helps you sort of visually remember who they are in the context of the story. So I could definitely there's something. Yeah, I could definitely see those characters being written to be like, okay, like let's get David Arquette to play this character because ain't nobody gonna forget that guy is that guy. Right. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, it's dope.
Yeah, good stuff. So this was a fun movie. I am super excited for what we have ahead. We have worked out, I think, most of our list for the rest of the season, and it is a gamut of movies. And so this has been Survivor's Ed, How to Not Die First in a Horror Movie. We talked about Ravenous today. If you haven't seen it, I don't know how you got to this point in the show, but please see it. It's a really fun movie. If you want to follow us, please follow us on Instagram at 2BXM Podcast. We are posting all kinds of questions, fun content there. And if you're watching this now, we've probably already started live streaming. So we're doing some live episodes on there where we kind of talk about whatever's going on in the moment in movies. And so please follow us on there. We're also on TikTok, same thing, 2BXM Podcast. And please, if you're listening to this on Apple, throw us a rating or a review. If you're watching on YouTube, please feel free to comment, subscribe. Basically, follow us wherever you can find us. And we'll keep doing what we do. And you can keep on watching and listening and doing whatever you do. All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Stay safe.
Don't get eaten by other people like, in the woods.